Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci de vous connecter aussi nombreux sur cette séance ambassadeur.
Welcome to all. Thank you for connecting to this ambassador session, which is a bit of a special session today because we're trying to strengthen skill sets. A few weeks ago, there was a session about corporate social responsibility. We believed it was important now to move on to business transformation momentum through digital and data. You will later hear you heard about digital, and today we're going to talk about data. It's a major challenge in terms of business transformation. A major challenge and not a purely technological one, which is why we decided to have this conversation with you. Because you are managers, you are leaders in your business units, and we believe that it's essential for you to ramp up, to upskill in this field. So, I'm going to share a picture with you. It's a picture of a telephone, and if you ask your parents how they would describe a telephone, they would say that there's a handset and that there's a rotary or a keypad and a cable to bring electricity and this little handset that you can speak into. And then a lot of people will say no. Your kids would say no. No wires, no strings, no electricity. It's a flat rectangular object. So I think you need to reflect on that, because the challenge of transformation that lies before us is similar to transitioning from a good old rotary phone to a flat rectangle that is simple, powerful, easy to use, from which a whole lot of security issues arise. There's the time you're going to spend on it. There are questions of usages. Is there going to be a fast learning curve? And there's also a whole issue of ecosystems. How can you integrate new applications, new usages through this telephone? And then the other advantage of this image of the telephone is that each one of you probably has a phone in their pocket, and no one needed to be taught how to use it because it was intuitive. You embraced smartphones because they were easy enough for you to use and make you want to use them more and more. And that's what we're going to try and do with data. We are really going to try to multiply, to boost our strength towards our customers through structured data that can be used to serve customers or to develop new business with them. It should also allow us to ramp up value creation and top line, but also in terms of operational efficiency. And to give you a notion of what it means, this is 2022. If each one of you thinks that we can go out there and boost our results by 10% by 2025 by using data more, I think that is probably a good figure to have in mind. So we have two Julien today, Julien Lévy from HEC and Julien Molez from our SG team, who are going to be sharing information about data. Feel free to ask questions, to send us your feedback, which is all the more important nowadays, because you really do need to have as much data as possible, much information as possible about data in order to leverage its power in your day-to-day work. So I wish you a great conversation, a great session, and I'll be delighted to see your feedback after this to see if there are any future improvements that can be made. Enjoy. Thank you very much for your introduction to this masterclass dedicated to data. We're going to be hosting this with Julien Lévy in order to give you the keys of the transformation. How can you use data and the transformation of the bank's business in various areas, and how can you leverage the full potential and know what you as ambassadors are going to need to do to fully play your part in this transformation process. So the agenda is going to be covering both general aspects. Why is this transformation happening now? Why are we switching from the old rotary phone to the smartphone? And then Julien Lévy will tell us about the use of data in other industries, particularly major French corporates. The second part of the session will be dedicated to practical, concrete examples to allow you to move forward. And we'll show you what already exists within the group, and then we'll finish by giving you details about what is expected of you in your use of data and what resources we are making available to you and your teams so that you can upskill. So let's start with the basics of data transformation. It's essentially linked to our innovation strategy. For the past 3 years or so, the innovation department serves to support all of the group's teams, and our mission in a fast-changing environment shaken by multiple crises that have a huge impact, be it the health crisis or the situation in Ukraine at the moment. But there are also behavioral changes created by the mass digitalization of our economy. Digitalization was further boosted by the health crisis, by increased use of digital services by consumers around the world. And that has a number of consequences for us, notably changes in customer expectations. They are now in the habit of consuming digitally, and they expect transparency and responsiveness and hyper accessibility of such services. And in the past few years, there are also a large number of new entrants, fintechs, startups, big tech, who are competing with us on some parts of our value chain, payments, for instance, but not just payments, others too, and who are redefining the playing field. And in parallel, of course, regulatory constraints are stronger and stronger. We are asked to be much more granular in the manner in which we manage our data. So our innovation strategy is based on using digital and data to accelerate existing models and also to develop new business models that can be directly competitive and are data native. So this innovation strategy can be articulated around 5 pillars. First, how can we promote a customer experience first strategy? A particular focus on customers to make them ready, to put them at the heart of the digital experience. Second, how can we set up partnerships with incubators, startups, or other types of organizations that can help us to modernize our practices? Third, we need to make our digital transformation more tangible from a business point of view. Of course, you know what the technological assets are, a number of KPIs, number of use cases, but it needed to be made more concrete in customer acquisition or customer service, for instance. And fourth, of course, creating new business models, notably through the joint venture fund that's been active for the past 3 years, major acquisitions such as Shane and others, and the development of Forge. These are all the business models of the future. And fifth pillar, and this is the one that we are going to be focusing on today in this masterclass, how do you master data? How do you build it into our day-to-day business? How can each person concerned know how to leverage the power of data? So why is data such a hot topic today? Banks are, of course, a paperless industry and have been for years now. They trade non-tangible assets with IT. So we've been active in that field for years now. But there are four more recent factors that are further boosting the use of data. In a sense, it is that shift between the old rotary phone and the smartphone. First, data generation acceleration. Increased data through our smartphones. Our smartphones generate data, social media posts, emails, and so on. And that keeps rising in the past 2 years. Data created in the past 2 years seems to be greater than all data created before that, since IT was invented. And then, of course, things are encouraged by regulation, and a number of players are using open data formats much more. So the essential fuel to create products, is increasingly widespread. And then, of course, technology, big data, artificial intelligence, open source, and cloud providers who have made computing and storage capacities much cheaper. And then finally, of course, regulation, GDPR in the banking sector, and more recently the AI Act by the EU to regulate the use of AI in the EEA. So more possibilities, more responsibility, and more raw material with data to create even more added value for customers, which explains the current focus on increased data use. So today, how is this reflected in reality? The availability of technology and data changes the standards. What do our customers expect? What do our stakeholders expect? They expect more personalization, that we should push advice, give them insights based on that data, of course, within the framework of GDPR. They expect us to be more responsive, that we can have a natural conversation with them, notably through AI. They also need transparency. So there's a lot of data, but we're also expected to keep them under control and to project them or forward them to the various stakeholders, be they regulators, but also other stakeholders, NGOs, civil society, customers, who require more transparency. So what we need is to really keep the data under control so that we can be even more competitive in this fast-moving environment. So how is that done? How can we accelerate? How can we ramp up? We need to define a strategy, of course, in data control. And that strategy applies across our four major pillars, and Julien Lévy will tell you more about that, because it's the case almost everywhere. First point, the strategic appropriation and culture. How do we make sure that each of the players are familiar with the products and the added value that data can bring, and have the ability to integrate it in their transformation roadmap? Second, data management. Having data that is reliable, high quality, and easily accessible is also a great challenge, driven in the group by RESG GDO, Christine's team, and all of the group's data officers. It's a highly complex task, but essential if we want to be compliant with the requirements of regulators and of the business. And then infrastructure. We need to have platforms that can process and store the information to create database projects. We need the skills to do so. And that's the RESG DDS teams who are working on these platforms at the group level. And then, of course, talent. We need new talent, new organizations for these products, and not just in the world of tech. And that's why I'm talking to you today, because you need to factor in all of that into your business. And the talents will need to be lodged within the business units themselves. That's why you're ambassadors. We need to keep things as close as possible to our value chains to make sure that they deliver. Before we listen to Julien Lévy in a couple of minutes, maybe I could tell you where the Société Générale Group currently stands. We have a brief video, it's a few minutes long, with the major landmark achievements in our digital transformation.
As a pioneer in innovation, Société Générale has been reinventing itself for over 150 years. Today, digital technologies allow us to offer you a customer experience that is more personalized, smooth, and secure. The increasing digitalization of our services enriches our data assets, and thanks to artificial intelligence, we are unleashing its full potential and using it in a more precise and refined way. More than 330 solutions based on data and artificial intelligence are used every day to create greater value for the benefit of our customers and our staff. We are guided by a vision of the future where data is at the very core of our business, a process that is already well underway. Our goal is to generalize the use of these technologies to provide ever better services to our 30 million clients. Every day, over 1,000 experts work with our staff to build new data solutions for more customization, more responsiveness, more efficiency, and more security. Customization, it's more relevant services for everyone. For example, directly via the app of one of our international retail banks and available soon in other networks, we provide personalized and tailor-made advice and recommendations for our customers through the analysis of their data. Responsiveness, it's more rapidity and availability. For example, the callbot Elliot manages more than 4 million conversations per year at Boursorama, France's leading online bank. 7 days a week and 24 hours a day, it provides answers to our clients' more straightforward inquiries. Efficiency, it's more automation and better project management. For example, the solution SG Market My Cases helps us manage the 12 million emails received by the back offices of our market activities, automating their processing and follow-up. Security, it's more protection for our customers and our bank. For example, CAST automates the analysis of millions of hours of audio and email communications by our staff who are subject to market regulations. Operating in 16 countries and in 26 languages, CAST monitors 30 different channels of communication. Data and artificial intelligence are powerful tools, real catalysts to build innovative and responsible solutions for you and with you. Let's continue building together the solutions of tomorrow.
J'espère que vous avez apprécié cette...
So I hope you enjoyed the video. It encapsulates the key achievements within the group. Currently, if you look at all of the use cases developed by the teams within the group, we have around 330 use cases that are in production, with a very sharp increase, 80% increase since Q1 2019. 170 are based on AI, which is no longer a marginal technology. It's really already a key element of transformation in that. And all of that portfolio is expected to generate 230 million euros in value, either top line or bottom line, or an additional revenue. And we are expecting this value generation to materialize. So this portfolio is usually categorized with 4 key drivers. Risk management or operational efficiency, which is still the majority of the 330 use cases, and then there are more top-line oriented use cases to improve customer experience or business development, generate new sales or new products based on data. This portfolio has been increasing significantly in recent years. So if we take a step back and look at the group's history and its ambitions, in fact, since 2016, when we had our first approaches of big data, first data lakes and use cases, it was more in a kind of a lab mode to become familiar with the technology. Then there was ramping up in 2019 with a very powerful focus on value, so that we could quantify the expected value generation of each of the use cases and have a material impact on the business. And now, for 2022, our ambition is to move from 230 million euros in additional value to 350 million euros in the portfolio, in line with the ramping up. And we need to onboard a great number of players in the group, hence this masterclass, to make sure that you have all the keys in hand to reach that key result.
Aujourd'hui, peut-être une...
All right then, so all these case uses and portfolios is available on this shared platform. This is one of the assets that we've put together recently. The platform is available on Gmarket, SG Markets, but you can see the link on the right-hand side of the page called Access. It's open to all, and in each use case, here's an example here, you'll find a description, the expected results, the value in million of euros, and key contacts and links to documentation. So please go and have a look. Look at the case use in your scope, and you can also discover portfolios of other entities within the bank. All right, before I hand over to Julian, let's look at the main things we've covered. So today, the fact that we're data-driven, building in data, is a key part of our strategy to increase the group's competitive edge in a digitalized economy. Second, we have to develop strategy around data. This is absolutely crucial to unlock potential, and it's built on 4 additional pillars: strategic appropriation right the way through to an IT platform to manage and process the data. And then the third pillar on my slide, data within the bank delivers significant value, but our ambition is to go further. 230 million is where we stand today, all the way through to 350 million euros for a more systematic rather and strategic way of managing our business. Right, I can hand over to Julian now. I asked him to come so that he can share his view as an HEC researcher. He knows very broadly the data system beyond the bank's borders. And then we'll have a Q&A. But before doing that, perhaps you can pipe through your questions so that we can have a Q&A session, as I say, following Julian's presentation. We'll have a brief break, and then we can move on to the remainder of our event. Thanks very much, Julian, for your SG policy presentation. And I'm particularly delighted to be able to speak before you to talk about the results, the findings, if you like, of a benchmark process that we've done for data consumption. It was an event that was held about a month and a half ago. And what we've seen, what we've done, is that we've extended research that we've done within the HEC, a Net Explo on transformation policies in 2016. We did a study to look at what data governance involved, and it was emerging. Everybody thought it was important, but there wasn't really any policy or practice that was properly well settled. And then 2019, we did management training, and we asked senior officials certain questions. We saw things were starting to be structured. In the data transformation interviews we did, we can see that we're accelerating. And we also went to a panel of companies industrial companies, but also service industries such as Air France, telcos, banks like BPCE, SNCF as well, other banks, BNP Paribas, retail, in Carrefour, and agribusiness, Nestle. So let me show you the findings subsequent to those interviews and the work that we've done to try and boil that down to something in the form of a summary. So we've moved from something technical to something strategic, content-wise. Before data, it was more IT systems, and it was used specifically in silos. So what's changed? And Julian referred to some features of that, but I think fundamentally, we've got digital revolution. And what does that revolution involve? It's not PCs, it's not internet, it's not connected objects. Fundamentally, it's the idea that we need to turn everything into data. And everything needs to be transformed through data. And this fundamental underpinning of this digital revolution means that data becomes a lever, a key lever that companies can pull, that can change or see their performance undergo a sea change. Now, we've got the anarchy of data, and we need to move to governance of data. Anarchy would be everybody in their own silo, in their own business. They've got their own data. They're going to use that partially for specific objectives to produce data that will be an asset, capital for cross-cutting purposes. So we need to move from one to the next. So what is company or corporate data transformation? It means innovating the way that you do your business by using data to improve productivity, develop your business, and generate value for customers. So we can see that the outcome of all this is part and parcel of company strategy: productivity, creation of value, growing the business, and that data is a means to an end. And let me just underscore a very important point: innovation in the way you do business. And this is the most interesting point, but it's also very critical when handling data. So to provide a summary of the findings of our study, I suppose we could say this: that data transformation in companies are built around 5 dimensions. The first is strategy. Now, in some cases, people think that companies should be data-driven. They should be restructured, therefore, around data, which is what the digital natives doing, the GAFAMs, that structure themselves very considerably around data. But most of our interlocutors are saying that data policies need to feed into the corporate strategy or be of use for the grassroots players in the company. Carrefour, its strategy is focused on customers, and they say, look, data policy for us, we want to have projects where directly or indirectly, this needs to drive up customer satisfaction. For SNCF, the French railway company, they want to increase loyalty, productivity, or to boost, improve sales. For Nestle, for example. So in some cases, data quite clearly is designed to support corporate strategy. Here we have examples here. Eric Chagnot from Michelin, who tells us that we want to be a data-driven company. In other words, today, transformation is built around data, and Michelin is moving from an industrial company into a company that's built around data. And so this is a very assertive approach. Now let's look at Carrefour. The data officer at Carrefour tells us that what's the heart of our strategy is to be customer-centric. And so everything that we do data-wise must improve customer experience and boost satisfaction. He draws an example from this. When you optimize merchandising in retail outlets, our concern is thinking about the local relevance of these items to make sure basically that it's the customers in each retail outlet who have an assortment that they want to see on the shelves. So here you're tailoring your data processing to the corporate strategy. Second dimension, technical governance. Now, companies, they need to invest in technology because they want to move from data anarchy to data governance. Now, Julian, I need to check something. Can you see my slides, Julian? Very good. Okay, lovely. I was just worried. I wanted to make sure that everything was going smoothly. All right, so companies currently are very reliant on data that are generated by legacy systems, by past information systems, by old tools, legacy tools, in a word. And because of that, this is what I was describing when I talked about data anarchy. Data is partial, are in silos, they're not standardized, sometimes they're contradictory, going to the same point. Often they're not documented. In other words, we don't really know what they're gauging and measuring. And the policy for the company it wants to invest in new platforms, therefore. And these platforms has to process data to clean, complete, make this data reliable, improve their quality, make sure basically the data is capital, an asset for the company, and not simply something residual flowing from grassroots action. But data governance is not pipelines and what have you. No, we need to think about an organizational mode, the meaningfulness of what we do based on the skills we have. So if you say data governance, you have to think about HR and using tools appropriately. Let's look at this example. This comes from Air Liquide. Air Liquide wants to be data driven. They say we already produce lots of data, but we want to move from a fragmented system to a governed system. We want to move from a technological management of data to a business management of data. And we need to move from experimentation to scaling up of this process. And Bruno Adon says this is crucial, a major challenge. So what do we see? Well, we can see a trend over the last few years in the governments. Now, many companies are saying, look, we're going to go incrementally. We're going to use our legacy apparatus in order to promote new ways of doing things, new tools that we can latch on to our legacy apparatus, which is just perfectly viable. But what we do see is that increasingly companies are saying, no, that's too long, it takes too long, or it doesn't work. So we need now to act in a more assertive fashion, more proactive. We're going to move our IS systems into the cloud. We're going to break with our legacy apparatus. We're going to set up new tools, new standards, basically so that we can pick up speed in our data transformation process. So here's a good example from Engie. It's an industrial company. It's very interesting because it's a company that's grown through M&A. And right from the outset, Gérard Guinémon, the CEO of the day of Energy, he decided that he wanted to have a hyper-centralized approach, which means you've got one data hub or one data deck, you've got one single set of global tools and one single type of processing said tools. And this is why the example is interesting. It doesn't mean that the data usage is centralized. No, it's the technologies that are. So let's look at the data architecture at Engie. We've got data sources, internal, external, but these data sources will be put into the system through interfaces. Then they're going to be in a data lake, a joint cloud-based data lake. And then we're going to deploy some tools based on the user profile to process the data and then use them in the various business entities. And as Gérard Guinémon was saying, he said, our company, Engie, is very decentralized. Our data policy is very local, but thanks to our hyper centralized technology, it means that the local people can go faster. And based on our strategy, we can change tack if they need to reorganize their things. And we've reorganized our things into 4 vertical approaches. Another final point. Data projects are designed to become industrialized. And so they want to have interfaces that employees can use. Now, data mature companies want to increase the usage of data by their employees through business intelligence tools, by data visualization tools. And to make that possible, they need to have built beforehand the right databases. They need to have technological platforms that are smooth running and the right tools. Basically, they need to have devised something that's useful to business and not simply for the purposes of IT. So you have to think about it as a means to an end. And of course, you need to train employees. So what's at stake here is democratization of data access. Next point, data quality. Now, what comes through quite clearly here is that what's very much at stake here is data quality, more than ever. As the companies become mature, as they have more powerful tools, the output, the end result, therefore, it depends on the quality of the data input. And to manage data quality, companies are starting to say, look, we're very happy not to have massive oceans of data. So now we can cherry pick. We can choose the data of interest to us. So we select the data. Once we've done that, then we try to collect and store data sets that are reliable. And that could be called a data catalog, for example. The data ontology means that you make sure that that data needs to be measuring something that we know what it's measuring. And in some cases, and this is true of a bank, quite obviously, we've got regulatory and legal obligations we need to abide by. And so this data helps us that the data is of quality. So when you need to give figures, facts and figures to the regulator, you make sure that these latter have been generated through a data processing process which is reliable. And so you do a data genealogy, which is quite a heavy duty approach. Here's an example. A company was saying, look, I went around the sales department and they said the data is great because we set up a CRM. It's been around for a while. So we got lots of a long view of past data. He said, well, don't need to work on that now. And this powerful Salesforce system is up and running, but they realize it doesn't work. Well, why? Well, because the data is very poor quality, they notice. So what happened then? Well, that sales department was using data that they collated through sales promotions over email, that data profiling had been badly inputted, or they weren't too concerned with them. So basically they had data sets that were very poor quality, that was only used for a particular usage. But when they wanted to broaden the usage, then they really had to start from scratch again. So data quality is not only about technical nuts and bolts. Okay, it raises training, organizational questions. So how can companies make sure that data is of quality? Well, right across all the companies, they try to standardize. So they say, look, before we had one way of collecting data, here's the best way. A customer needs to be defined by this selection process. For critical data, you put together a repository. Rather than having a massive lake, you have a data set where you say, look, we're absolutely certain of the quality of this data. And obviously, we can extend the data catalog, and we're going to appoint people who are responsible for sourcing data. And then, of course, there'll be a data culture that will have to be sensitized through data officers. Airbus is a case in point. What they had to grapple with was data quality, and they said that data quality is not about technicians, it's about something to do with managers. So every business entity is responsible for its data category. We appoint one manager who will make sure that the data is of quality with his teams to make sure that the data comes to the data catalog, which is reliable, and then the other arms of the company can use quality data. Now, data usage. Now, contrary to other IT projects, data projects need to be steered by the business people. They are business driven. So the involvement of managers is absolutely crucial to make sure that this approach is successful. So when you look at the various milestones of a data project, what do you see? Well, you see it's the business lines that need to identify opportunities, reduction of risk, and what have you. Generally, they do an initial test on an initial data set. Then we look at the return on investment, and then they think about ramping it up. At each milestone, the manager has a role to play. Now, something that's very interesting that we see IT-wise is to see that agile methods are systematized over data projects. And I know that the SocGen has moved into that arena because your CEO told us at Explo that 50% of IT development expenditure is done according to agile methodology. And under that banner, obviously use different practices, but at the end of the day, you always land on your feet with this three-pronged approach. You can have a business owner who says, "Well, what's meaningful? Why is this meaningful for our business?" You've also got a project manager, a leader, if you will, make sure that everybody is making sure that it moves forward. And then you've got tech expertise in data and IT. This means that you're working very differently for the grassroots people and the IT people. We're all working together in the same boat with these different profiles. One question that is going to be raised with the data project, some are saying you need to develop local experimentation. The more you do that, the better it is. Others are saying, oh, no, you mustn't do that. We mustn't spread ourselves too thin. We need to focus on very highly structured projects. Well, there are different schools of thought here. Let's look at the second school, Yves Tirod from BPCE, one of our colleagues, who says, look, I'm against the POCs for POC's sake. I don't want to finance lots of projects. I want to focus on one or two high impact projects. So they'll put together, 3, 4, possibly maximum 5 such projects. On the contrary, you've got other companies such as BNP Paribas, and I think this is really where the SocGen is going. It says, look, I'm a diverse company. We're global. To confine ourselves to small projects would be to miss opportunities. It's locally where you see opportunities arise that will create value, that will boost productivity, reduce costs. So our role, therefore, is to support those grassroots initiatives and then to identify them in order to replicate best practices. So we can see here we've got different approaches. And then let me round off on the HR challenge. We see it on my slide. At the end of the day, in terms of HR, there are 3 major levers that you can pull. The first one is acculturation, which means that managers, but also IT people who have a management approach will see that data is important and that value creation is built around how you're managing data within the company. So that means that you need to create a proper environment. So these managers facilitate data's processing in the company, and increasingly you're going to democratize data usage. And there's a second point, training people that are going to be leading data projects. And as I was saying a moment ago, you've got business, you've got a project manager and IT people. So all these people need to be trained in agile methodology to properly identify business opportunities and to communicate amongst themselves. And then the third thing here, there's at stake, you need to recruit those rare pearls, those rare skills. It's a challenge for all companies because these skills are rare. Data skills are rare. How do you draw them to your flag? How do you build loyalty with them? Let me round off on this point from Airbus. He says it's straightforward. Between the recruitment process and when the new resource becomes active, you have to wait between 6 and 9 months. That's huge, isn't it? Thinking about the data development timeframe, which means that you need to play with several cards. You need to train internal teams in varied fields, in technology, management, and project management.
So in conclusion, what do we have across the 5 dimensions of transformation? 1, strategy, with companies who say they are data-driven. Most companies who say that data policy must be at the service of the business strategy. 2nd, technology governance with increased control and standardization of the tech policy. 3rd, data governance with data quality, which is key. It's not a technical challenge, it is indeed an organizational process. Ensuring data quality. Then project governance. Experimentation must aim to achieve industrialization, integration into the processes, global and local. And finally, human resources, with questions of acculturation, training, and recruitment. Thank you. So I'll stop sharing my screen and back over to you. Thanks very much, Julien, for your insights, both on the structuring and market vision. We can clearly see that it's a key concern in the strategic exploitation of data. for various stakeholders. We have a couple of questions in the audience. Perhaps you could answer those. You went into that briefly. Question from Veronique. Should the data and AI knowledge be grouped centrally and then trickled down, or should it be locally based? There's a big debate, of course. I'm not sure there's a best practice in that respect. At Michelin, for instance, all of the tech teams were brought together in 3 data factories across the world, and all data projects are developed remotely between the central tech teams and the production plants. So they create kind of competence clusters that cross-fertilize, and it also allows people to see what's going on and to very quickly duplicate best practices. And the trade-off is that, of course, there's a constraint imposed on the business, but all of the projects are accepted, nothing can be turned down, and everyone's involved in funding. So that's what Michelin chose to do, but that's in line with their corporate culture. What often happens is that there's a central team that will be managing governance and broad sweeping projects, and then the projects themselves are developed locally at the heart of the business. And this is a challenge with with data professionals who say that one of the great difficulties is that if you have data scientists who have no clue about how the business works, that doesn't work. So there needs more proximity between tech and business. I don't know what you think, Julien? Yes, well, there's not a one-size-fits-all. Even Société Générale started very highly centralized and is now decentralizing so that people can really understand the business challenges, but also central teams working on common technologies to avoid reinventing the wheel, with, of course, a network of chief data officers, but those who construct, those who build the products themselves are onboarded and embedded into the business. We have a question from Stanislas, who would like to know, it's a question about SG, so I guess I'll answer. Have we really factored in the customer-centric aspect, the efficiency aspect, the regulatory challenges? I have a sense that these 3 approaches are not necessarily factored in. So for the first part of your question, the markers that we use to categorize the use cases take these dimensions into account, both in terms of an improved customer experience through interfaces to make it more seamless with given use cases, a dimension in terms of operational efficiency, predictive models or analytical piloting. And from the regulatory point of view, a lot of use cases, data use cases for fraud detection, for anti-money laundering measures and so on. So all of that is very much in line with the strategic priorities of the bank. And they leverage the same data from different strategies, strategic points of view. So it's a common material shared in different ways. I think an interesting development, Julien, is that the more businesses are mature, the more they handle different types of data differently. Regulatory data, for instance, ultra secure, quality validation, data lineage, and so on. There's customer data, which is highly sensitive because there's also regulation there, GDPR. And there's data where we think, okay, it's less critical. So I think there's a sense that in the way in which things are changing for people, there will be a differentiated management of data because there will be different constraints based on the specific circumstances. Another question that might be interesting to address. Thomas is saying, okay, I hear what you say. I'm sure that everyone knows how important data is. But today, there are a lot of applications that work in silos. What can we do about that in order to better leverage data? What's your opinion? Well, Julien, you'd better get to work, because the better you raise awareness in the business lines, the more they will start wondering whether they have the right tools and the right data sets. When training managers, I hope they complete the training and feel enthusiastic because they can see how all of that relates to their day-to-day work. But be careful, because when you go back to work tomorrow, you might feel frustrated because you're going to start working on projects. You will realize that you don't necessarily have the right data, that it's not necessarily the right quality, that the processes will need to change, that there will be pitfalls. But that's what the learning curve, that's how a learning curve works. Even a company that has a lot of high quality data, very often what you want to achieve is not necessarily feasible. And in fact, the right momentum is incremental. You need to create data sets that you're going to share, that are high quality data sets, and that are going to create more opportunities for work. It's more a dynamic state than an on-off state. And data transformation is not a very clear switch. It's an accumulation of best practices that you build on. So year after year, things can go very quickly. But you might want to answer too. But I believe that Société Générale, for a number of years now, has engaged in the digital transformation process, that you already have assets, but you probably have a lot left on your plate. Absolutely, in terms of the accessibility of data and trying to fight against the silo effects. We have 330 use cases that leverage data, but it's very often ad hoc data. And even if we are paying close attention to data quality, of course, the material and how accessible it is requires investments, balanced investments. You can't just focus on that. You need to also invest in data. And the investments must also be made on data catalogs, documented and high quality data sets. Perhaps a final question from Olivier Picard, who would like to know about the size and value of the portfolio, the 350 million euros we were talking about. We've tried to put a figure on that. He said, of course, is that value per annum? Yes, it's a target. Maybe part of the portfolio will not deliver. We still have the ambition to generate use cases. Some will probably fail. It's a part of the hit or miss process of experimentation. And the expected value can be either additional income, operational efficiency, and therefore reduced costs, and also cost of risk. It's not just NBI. It's not just purely NBI. So when there's a project under development, when a proof of concept is on the cards, I suppose one of the rules is to assess the ROI and see if you can validate the hypothesis. Is that how it works? Yeah, well, the idea, even if the process is not that formalized, when you start imagining a product, you need to think in terms of what benefits is going to bring. Is it going to bring customers or employees? And in the very first steps, we try to put a figure on things. We're not extremely demanding. We don't want an ultra precise business case with precise figures of cash flow and so on. And then things become more precise as the project advances. Absolutely. So there are actually plenty of questions, but we still have quite a few sections to cover. So again, Julien, many thanks for coming here to share your insights. And we can see that there are a lot of things in common about how Société Générale, where it sits in terms of these challenges. Thanks, Julien, and bye. Okay, so I hope we'll have a little bit of time towards the end for other questions. Thanks for being so active. We're now going to go into the finer details. We talked a lot about the rationale here, but why the transformation? And now we're going to give you a number of indicators on how this can be included into concrete realizations through what we call the creation of data products. What types of data products are we talking about? So I'd say probably the best way to start is to talk about data product that doesn't really look like a data product on the face of it. And I'm sure that plenty of you use it. It's Google's webmail, Gmail. Why Gmail? You don't realize, but Gmail is absolutely brimming with artificial intelligence. More than 100 models are running all the time to improve user experience continuously. There are dozens of models. Let me just take two as an example. Smart categorization. You can see that in the middle. The algorithm in Gmail, based on parsing the contents of the message, automatically decides where to classify it in a kind of intermediate mailbox. You have the main emails, those that are more sort of commercial, and those that are social media notifications. Because if you don't sort them out, it makes browsing one's email box a bit complicated. So in order to do that, they developed an AI model that automatically detects the category and automatically sorts the emails based on past experience. Another even more impressive feature is Smart Compose. How does that work? When you start to draft an email, Gmail suggests the end of your sentence. So it's a huge time saver. In fact, more than half of the email doesn't even need to be typed. Artificial intelligence understands your own personal style, the style of millions of emails that it has, and suggests it's kind of predictive input. And it's a real time saver. About 20% of the time at work is spent writing and answering emails. So what can we learn from that? There's a kind of virtuous circle, in a sense, in that use of data to create these predictive models. A tool such as Gmail is designed to have more users, because the more users you have, the more data you can accumulate. And that data will create a data history. And the more data you have, input, the better the algorithms, smarter algorithms. And what are they going to do? They're going to improve the customer experience. So the better the quality of the experience, the more it's going to attract new users, which is why we call this a virtuous circle. It helps to improve the product, which is why the size of the audience of big tech is important, because the sheer size of its customer base helps it to improve much quicker. So we focused here on an AI product, a machine learning product, but basically there are four major product categories where data can be used to generate value. The first one, I'm sure you're familiar with it, although it's not quite at scale in the business. It's called analytics. It's the production of indicators, dashboards, automated dashboards, real time, through which you can navigate with Power BI, for instance, and the power of our process. Second example, data processing, big data computing, how you can use new data technology to compute across millions or billions of data items in a cheap and easy manner. Third type of product, so-called machine learning. That's also AI. Using predictive technologies to have algorithms that can use past data to predict the end of an email or make customer recommendations. And then the fourth type of product, which is also hugely powerful, it's data exchange. How can we share data? How can we monetize data, sell the data to our customers in line with our data policy? How can we share it with, including with competitors, using the right technology to generate more value by pooling things? Perhaps I could give you some concrete examples of these types of products within the group. Analytics, illustrated with two major programs that have already been rolled out across the group. One called Smart Analytics within GBSU, which systematically computes and creates dynamic dashboards across the value chain in GBSU's capital markets to pilot performance. So the managers use them on a daily basis to monitor and make decisions. Another example, program developed by the HR teams called HR Analytics that consolidates all of the HR data across the main HR processes on group level to obtain a more consolidated vision of the performance process, the mobility process, with key indicators on that can be monitored in a consolidated manner. For the big data, the data processing, complex computations on very large data sets developed in the group's data lakes. Example one, FRTB, Mark Risk and GBSU, in line with regulation to adjust the manner in which we calculate risk on market activities, and with a much larger data point processing needs to be reprocessed to produce risk metrics. And the group's teams have leveraged the big data technology and infrastructure to produce these daily calculations and address regulatory challenges. And then My Contrat, Risk, DFIN, and RASG to really fine-tune the computation power to feed more data with organizations or natural persons to calculate the credit risk. Again, through the investments that the group made in big data infrastructure. Machine learning products, two. In fact, we have more than 170 use cases based on AI. The first is a use case developed by GLBA teams for bond issues. Here it was to provide advice based on data of previous issues. So if a customer comes to see GLBA to issue bonds, we can predict based on the characteristics whether or not it has any chances of succeeding on the market with variables in the issuance and comparison of what has been done in the market. And that helps to optimize the parameters. In the same way, it can be used for sales forces to know which counterparties are the most likely to be interested. Second example, more on the regulatory side, developed by IGAD, CPLE, and Mark. It's a use case called CAST that automates the regulated communications on the market and automatically transcribes them, be they over the phone, email, or chat. So here it's automated language processing features to automatically detect abnormal conversation patterns, as can be found in market abuse. More than 2 million hours of phone conversations have been scanned, and billions of emails in many languages across many countries. And the use of algorithms is, of course, much more efficient than sampling methods. And then final product, in data exchange, we have two examples. one on Mark, Capital Markets, the market analytics platform that offers data sets that are very important for FI or hedge fund clients from the Mark teams, and they made available at a price. And then another example developed by GBSU, the Dani platform that pools third-party data and customer characteristics and shares them with other banks without any of the banks viewing the data from one or another. There are anonymizing technologies involved to find out whether the information we have about a third party is the same as what another bank has without anyone ever seeing that. See if there's a market consensus, say on the register's office of a counterparty, for instance. And we automatically compare things without actually threatening our data confidentiality. And then, so after these four main types of products, what I now wanted to do with you is to focus on AI. AI is, of course, a kind of mixture of fantasy and reality. When you have the DeepMind algorithm that managed to beat the South Korean chess champion, or you can paint a new Rembrandt based on data of existing Rembrandt paintings without being explicitly programmed to do so. Today, I think reality is much more pragmatic, beyond the fiction or beyond the buzzy examples. The integration of AI is much more integrated to the products I've just discussed. So maybe a quick definition of what we mean, because there's a lot of confusion around what we mean. Is it AI or is it machine learning? So, in fact, the notion of AI varies from one player to the other, but the definition that we have adopted is that it's a branch of algorithmic, of programming, and AI software can reason and make decisions, can act and can adapt. It can, in a sense, reprogram itself based on the results. One of the branches of AI is machine learning. There are other branches, such as expert systems, but the most promising in terms of investment is so-called machine learning, based on data. Past data is leveraged to predict the future, and the more data you have, the more precise the prediction will be. And then there's deep learning, another part of machine learning. Artificial neural networks are very good at processing text and image, and they are a subset of deep learning. So as we saw, all of this is based on data and predictions, which of course generates a number of ethical issues, particularly in terms of the reproduction or replication of elements that are in the data sets, and that was seen in the past. Look at Amazon's recruitment hiring tools. There were recruitment algorithms that were sexist and with a gender bias. Or Apple, who used machine learning in granting Apple cards, and that was also gender biased. So they do use past data, and you need to be very careful not to replicate past mistakes. And then, of course, they adapt in order to measure performance over time. And that is a point on which the European Commission published the so-called AI Act to regulate the use of AI in the EEA. And there are risk management policies that already exist. But in terms of innovation, we have already done a lot because we believe that diversity is reflected in a data set, but also in the people who use these algorithms. So there are a number of initiatives that were conducted across the group. Women in AI, there aren't that many women data scientists. And we believe it's really important to reach gender equality so that the algorithms can learn properly, not just in the data sets, but the manner in which they're designed, and also workshops with younger people, teens and girls in AI, and so on, to encourage kids to embark on the AI adventure. As we saw, it's AI or machine learning is one of the types of products we can use for prediction, but where can a bank draw the most value from? First, from personalization. How to predict customer advice, how to predict things that are going to happen in the future, to personalize the relationship in order to contextualize based on customer data in terms of investment, in terms of alerts about behaviors and so on. It's a transactional, personalized approach. Second, responsiveness. AI algorithms are very powerful at language processing, email, chat, to respond. So, of course, they have a basic understanding. And that's why we have chatbots emerging, and also so-called voice bots that can answer over the phone and can very quickly answer emails from our customers. Third, efficiency. It sounds pretty conventional, but with a specific approach. In document management, there are a lot of processes within the group that are based on document analysis, receiving the confirmation of an order or an invoice for a loan, receiving an email with a PDF attachment, double-clicking it, finding the information, copying the information. Now, AI is powerful enough to do that itself and to complement human analysis, or at least save time. And then final point, where AI and algorithms are very powerful, it's the detection of abnormal behaviors or fraud, attempted fraud. And these are extremely interesting algorithms in the fight against fraud or money laundering. So to the key takeaways for this section. In our view, value generation can come from four major types: analytics, complex data processing, machine learning, and AI, or data exchange. AI, due to its powerful predictive capability, notably on natural language, it's very powerful in bringing value on four specific areas for banks: personalization, responsiveness, efficiency, security. And finally, AI can adapt and self-evolve, and that makes it very special in data collection. But it requires strong ethical standards to achieve trustworthiness. So I hope these first elements in the masterclass were useful for you to understand the keys to the transformation and the concrete achievements. And in the final section, the message we wanted to convey is about you. The 350 million euros that we're aiming for and the strategic transformation won't happen without you. We need you. That's why we're having this conversation with you. We are well aware that you need the adequate resources in terms of training to onboard your teams, to go further, and to start building your own data products. My strong belief is that that can't be done centrally. We can't be familiar with the diversity of your customers. The only ones who can really have the capacity to align that with the overall strategy are the teams in the various business lines. And you are the best placed to play that part, because of course we are convinced that these four use cases to complement our portfolio and boost growth must be aligned with the business strategy. We need data analysts, but we also need business expertise. And that is what you have. And we need that to design these data products.
So this data transformation is more of a cultural transformation. I think Julian underscored that point quite considerably. So we need to onboard everybody, not only experts, because we need to get down to the granular fashion. We need to see what data we've got, generate ideas, think about new modus operandi. We talked about agility methodology, but also think about devising the products. We need fresh blood, fresh talent, so that in the future we can put together these new products. And then the third pillar, which picks up on Stefan's question about data access and data tooling, make it more democratic, so that everybody can access a huge data set and helpful data tools. All right, then, perhaps one or two questions. These questions will be something that you may need to ask yourself or with your teams. Am I still part of this data transformation, for example? And you might wonder, well, even at my level, do I know a data expert? Your chief data officer, do you interact with them or do you not know them? Do you know the data strategy of your entity, the major use cases, the investment that we've done? The daily usage of data. Do you have any opportunity to use data directly from the system or from an interactive system with analytics? We saw that earlier on. Do you do that in your team meetings? Or do you talk about process performance in that realm? Do you have access to this data easily? Because you might have access to an application and you want to look at data within that. But here, you need to be able to access the raw data and rework it in Excel or something else. This is the type of question that would be worthwhile asking. Now, do you have indicators on the main value chains for which I'm responsible? Maybe credit analysis, what's going in and out of your inbox, and the indicators. How can you follow them dynamically over time? And other more overarching questions, and perhaps we can answer them with the solutions that we'll be offering after the fact. Do you know the possible value added for the data to change your perimeter? Is that nebulous? Last, are you ready to sponsor a data product? All right, so that's a lot of questions to grapple with. Obviously, we're not going to answer those questions today. It's really designed to guide your role in this transformation process. And today we're intimately convinced that this involves training. So the masterclass today is just an introduction to a broader training program that we'd like you to embark upon as ambassadors so that you can take things further. So today you can see this program that we've devised for you, which will be available as early as tomorrow. And it will be rolling out over the entire year to help you go that step further based on your appetite, the time that you can devote to it. But it's your responsibility to take things further, to understand the underlying. It will be helpful for CSR, digital, and data will be one of the major strategic levers to pull over the next few years. So it's very important that everybody takes on the responsibility to look at that in the finer detail. So our program is something where you can learn at your rhythm, at your own pace, and take things forward. But as I say, in your own way, self-paced learning, if you will. We're also going to be organising Ask Me meeting. It's a kind of a Q&A. It's like this one, but it's basically designed to pick up on any questions that you may have. There are no bad questions. There are no silly basic questions about data. We can answer your questions and then guide you. You can hook up through the link that's available in the chat box to enroll now. And then we've got a more advanced curriculum which has a certification at the end, 100 or so places there at HEC. So what does this all involve? Learning by example. Within the group, we've got a number of things that's available. We've got use cases, there's 16 major ones that are detailed. There's a webinar, there's editorialists, there's lots of things in SG News. And each of these boxes is a link, so you can consume at your own pace, basically based on your interests. If you want more info about one of these points, then contact me and I'll be delighted to provide greater detail, give you a greater insight. But of course, all this is available on SBC, which is available on the link on the bottom right. We've also set up a partnership with Coursera Online Learning. You can learn at your own pace. We've got 4 major curricula here. We use this in conjunction with HR, Group HR. This has been up and running for the last 3 years. 5,000 people have gone through this process. So enroll. The whole point about this is that you can go at your own pace over a mobile phone, for example, and this will be available for everybody within the bank. Other initiatives, Data for Business. This is a program that was devised initially by GBSU teams and deployed in a number of their teams in GBSU and what have you. We're going to try and make this available for the entire group. Data for Business involves 4 one-hour points on governance, data quality, usage, and data science, basically the 4 salient features of data. 4 times 1 hour will give you therefore an overview of data. And if this is of interest, enroll. We'll be organizing sessions that will group you all together by ambassadors so that you can share on this point. 4 sessions, 1 hour each, as I said. Maybe that can be staggered over an 8-week period. Next, we've got certification programs, HEC and NetExplo. They're there to give you a certificate. This is 25 hours over 6 weeks. This next sessions, you can see the date here. You have this certification program for you as ambassadors to fulfill your role, to build in your understanding of data in your daily practice. So please enroll. Ask questions about this program. So we have this with HEC, NetExplo with English or in French for people who want to join this remotely. And we also have a Harvard Business School program. It's a bit of a weightier subject if you want to go even further. Karim Lakini, for example, is involved, who wrote a seminal work on this. This is 40 or so hours over 9 weeks, end of March to May or September to November for those who wish to benefit from that. So hopefully these various training avenues may be useful for you. Please sign up, and of course we'll come back to you to help you understand what's under the bonnet if you didn't really understand. I was going too fast basically in my presentation. So the key takeaways. We need to do this cultural transformation, and you're very involved in this to reach our 350 million value target, which is a key cultural and business challenge for the group. Investing in these skills is crucial for this cultural change. And of course, we're looking forward to you joining this program. And of course, I'm at your avail to help you prompt all this development. So very quickly, I took this quotation, which tells us that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It may look trivial, but with big data, you have to make that first step. You need to build your data product. You need to imagine an initial product. You'll fall off at at the beginning maybe, but don't feel disillusioned. And Julian Levy said, you need to grapple with things to be successful. And of course, most important of all, we need you to make sure that this massive 350 million target will be reached. It won't be done with anybody left by the wayside, where we've got lots of use cases that we can use, and we can use them to go that step further. So thanks very much for your attention. And perhaps now we can move on to a Q&A to pick up on your questions. only 5 minutes remaining, but if you do have time and you can stay, then we can take the questions and offer some answers.
Alors, donc on a des questions sur la...
So we have a question about feedback from Vola. How can we accelerate data acculturation? Well, we've talked about the fact that you need to understand what's going on in the group, understand the use cases, look at the seminars, follow the presentations, go to the Go/platform that has been made available for you, meet the focal points using these use cases, and then train yourself, learn, follow various modules that we've made available, either in self-learning format or through certified curricula to get a better understanding of what's involved to upskill. Gilles Versailles asks us about retail, scoring, credit, automation, which area is seeing great progress within the bank. All right, well, listen, we did some market research last year, which went over the main use cases that we can see in the retail world, either offered by European, Asian or American banks or by fintechs. What did we find? We got about 95 use cases across our scope. Risk management and what have you was involved in there. But collectively, SG has started working, let's say, 80% of its use cases. I say that because with Boursorama, with BDDF, Eastern Europe and Africa, these retail areas, we haven't used them all, these use cases, but we're pretty good for fraud detection. We're good on managing efficiency operations. We're starting to ramp up several conversations to reach 1,000 a day. The voice bot is doing well, using AI in call centers to answer quickly over the phone, and sales and marketing as well, recommendations, best recommendations offered, best products recommended to support our sales force by detecting the most appropriate product for a retail consumer. Automating advice, therefore, but always in conjunction with the sales teams.
On a une question de...
Mohamed Shukr is asking us this. Cleaning data and connecting legacy systems can prove very costly. So how can we be more radical? How can we have clean data, proper architecture, sitting in parallel to the legacy systems to facilitate a transformation? So taking things back to scratch. Yes, making data of quality and accessible based on legacy systems is a costly process. We know that. And you may think it's simply much better to start from scratch. And we've got a number of approaches, and they're complementary within the group, not only on data, but on core banking systems, whether we start from scratch or do we build a tailored system. But for data, we need to have a systematic approach of creating data sets, extracting them, documenting them, because even if we use a new system, it will become complex over time. The by design process can help us document data sets, but of course you need to be properly rigorous over time to manage the transactional process, core banking and transactional systems more broadly, and data management that you're able to do as time goes by. So there will always be the temptation under pressure to be less rigorous, but by default we need to be stringent, need to be rigorous, irrespective of what we decide to do with the core banking system. We need to be disciplined. We need to be committing to that. And I'm not sure that starting from a clean sheet of white paper is the best way to go, to be honest. question from Rami Denny. The sales teams in compliance will necessarily are going to be interested in this approach, but what's possible legally, technically, and particularly thinking about CapEx. Of course, this is a recurring point. If we look at it from the angle, how do I put it? Look, the idea is to have an idea, devise the products. And I suppose that's the most difficult thing for business teams, to try and devise a product. How is that going to be a game changer? Obviously, you have to look at whether the data is accessible in the first place and make sure that it is accessible, therefore to use it. But the group has already set up a number of robust processes in data questionnaire, looking at data accessibility, looking at GDPR accessibility, compliance, and this is all very rigorous, put together to make sure that we're where we should be. From a legal perspective, we know how to go, but obviously we need to imagine what product is appropriate. Of course, CapEx is crucial. It's pretty restricted currently. There's obviously, it's absorbed by regulatory practices that we need to abide by, but we need to think about the long term. The life cycle of a data product involves an idea phase rather, and this can be done with teams that are doing a non-involved CapEx process to make sure after that initial work is done, that can be moved onto an IT team to industrialize the entire process. So the initial idea phase doesn't necessarily take CapEx. And as I say, budget-wise, technical-wise, legal-wise, we really understand how to adopt the best approach. Next question, Corinne Turon. What about the projects with Olivier Picard? Data, artificial intelligence, and SG as a whole for the business units and in central. Now, data is key for the bank. It's key for making sure that we fulfill our commitments, that we offer reportings for our businesses or for the regulator, make sure that SG can produce new models, climate change impact, for example. Now, data is difficult to find. It's difficult to source it. Risk, for example, we've got people looking at that. So we need to acquire data, but there can be interesting predictive usages of data. Two examples I mentioned. Look at a startup called Greenly, which has used a commonplace model. How can I predict my carbon footprint for private individuals for their banking data to help them be more virtuous in their own carbon footprint? Another example of value, Micmo is another startup that use satellite imaging through deep learning to develop looking at SG's real estate and how eco-friendly it is. And Neymar is a data supplier that uses AI to provide data sets for insurance companies, for example, or for merchant banks. I think I'll stop there because I'm mindful of the fact that we've slipped the hour by 4 minutes. I'd like to thank all of you for your attendance, for the numerous questions. I'll take time to answer all these questions in writing, those that I couldn't adjust myself to on mic. Very diverse and interesting questions. But I'm at your avail, as well as my teams, to offer answers about any question you may have about training or anything going to what we've covered today in this masterclass. And have a lovely day. Bye.